India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship, Young Turks, turns 21, and we are back with a brand new season of Voices from the Valley. This season, we bring you stories from the front line of what's being called the biggest technological innovation of our times, generative AI. In this edition of Voices from the Valley, we hear from General Catalyst and two of its portfolio startups that are transforming enterprises and enabling employees with tools of the future. We put the spotlight on Glean and Eightfold AI. Hailed as the ChatGPT for work, Glean offers a generative AI search engine for enterprises. Glean connects a company's many different knowledge applications, be it Slack, SharePoint, Salesforce, GitHub, Google Drive, or Outlook, and provides a unified search experience. What Google has done for search, Glean aspires to do for workspaces. Founded by former Google, Microsoft, and Meta employees, the startup is among a dozen generative AI unicorns created since mid-2022. Currently in use at more than 100 global enterprises, Glean is making its name as the software app for all software apps. While Glean puts all the information an employee needs at the fingertip, Eightfold AI is changing the way an employee gets hired and grows in an enterprise. Eightfold AI's platform helps companies manage the entire talent lifecycle of every employee, starting with a fair hiring process. Vodafone began using Eightfold AI to hire more digitally skilled workers and women. US chipmaker Micron used the software to turn off a candidate's last name or exclude the name entirely to cut race or gender bias. A unicorn valued at $2 billion, Eightfold AI is present in 110 countries with LG, Chevron, Bayer, Morgan Stanley, and Starbucks in its clientele.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Young Turks. As we turn 21, we're back here in Silicon Valley to chronicle stories of Indian investors and startups that are on board the AI game. As we've been doing traditionally for the last 21 years, the effort really is to understand what's exciting, what's giving investors confidence, and what founders are betting on. Today with me at the General Catalyst office in Palo Alto, Deep Nishar. Deep, it's great to be back here with you at the GC office. And of course, two of your portfolio companies, Arvind Jain, the CEO and co-founder of Glean, started in 2021, and you claim to be the ChatGPT for work. I'll talk to you about that, Arvind, in just a second. And also with us, Ashutosh Garg, the CEO and founder of Eightfold AI, helping clients that you service attain nirvana using artificial intelligence, and of course part of the generative AI movement as well. But Deep, before I talk to you about what's happening with the AI party and, you know, is this overheating at this point in time, let's talk about the overall macros. And we've seen a big slowdown as far as VC funding is concerned in Q1, down almost 50% at this point in time. You're sitting on a lot of dry powder. Are we at the start of the correction? Are we in the middle of the correction? Are we getting closer to the end of the correction?
So, Shereen, great to be back on the show, and congratulations on completing 21 years of following and coming to Silicon Valley and talking to all of us. One fun fact before I answer your question, all three of us are ex-Googlers, and we are contemporaneous, as in we all worked there, some 15 to 20 years ago together. So it's great that you brought the crew back together.
I'm glad that we did.
When it comes to macro, if we knew the answer, we would all be out there investing on that. I do believe that the worst may not already be here yet. And the reason for that is inflation, at least in the US, continues to stay stubbornly high, as well as the fact that, the excesses of 2021 are beginning to show in terms of indigestion at this point in time, but they could get worse from here.
Okay, if the indigestion is going to get worse, what is that going to result in? I mean, we're seeing markdowns across the board, including as your portfolio companies, some of the large companies in your kitty. We've seen layoffs happening at this point in time. If you believe the indigestion has only just started, what could it result in as we move forward?
I think the first thing that happens is the gap between value and value creation starts converging. So in 20 and 21, I think the gap sort of widened a little bit more than it normally does. In general, private market valuations are always a little ahead of public market valuations because we are betting on a longer term trend and the growth and innovation in those companies, which will be a lot more than public markets. I think those trends are now converging a bit, but also the companies have grown over the last couple of years. So as you know, when you talk to both Ashutosh and Arvind, you'll find out that those companies have not just taken the challenge, but doubled down because of the value creation that they have in their customer base.
So what happens as far as your investment thesis and your investment strategy is concerned in an environment like this where you believe that more pain is up ahead? Do you sit back? Do you sparingly invest? How are you reviewing your strategy?
So our strategy continues to be the same, which is find the best possible companies and the best possible entrepreneurs and enter at the appropriate valuation. So don't get over exuberant and don't get too stingy. And that's the way you generate long-term value. In our business, many times the best value is created after the company goes public, and they can double, triple, even go 10 times. If you look at an Amazon, you look at a Google, you look at, hopefully eventually Stripe, those companies all will generate a lot more and have some of them generated a lot more value after they've gone public. And you and I talked about this even last year. So the enduring companies always endure the test of time. And that's what we try to look for at all times. What is changing right now is that we are getting a little bit more time and breathing room to really spend that time. During COVID times, a lot of investments happened over Zoom for all of us in the industry. And when times get a little tougher, what also happens is more sanity ensues in the market, and everyone sort of takes a pause. And that pause is very good, both for the entrepreneurs building the company and also for the investors investing in those
So companies. A long pause, is that what you anticipate?
No, not really. I mean, we have been investing, at least at General Catalyst last year, this year, at a pretty steady clip. But valuations have rationalized, which is a great thing. And if you see, a lot of value creation happens during the cooler periods in the market, because the vintage of companies that come out during those times are the ones that are started by entrepreneurs who really care. And now we are also seeing, along with that, a compounding factor, which is this new step change in technology, AI technology, which has been around for a long time. But generative AI over the last 3 to 4 years has now really come of age. And that's going to completely upend some very large swaths of our economy. Yeah,
I will talk to you about the generative AI and the AI bet that that GC is making, and you want to be called as optimistic participants in this story. But Ashutosh, I would understand from you, as far as Eightfold is concerned, what are you hoping to solve for at this point in time within the HR space?
Absolutely, Shereen. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. Super excited to be at your show. This is my first time. My quick background is I'm a machine learning AI person by training. So I got my PhD in AI back in the days, more than 20 years back. So AI is not a new thing for me. It's more around that it has become mainstream now. And really, when we started the company in 2016, the very first question was that, why are you guys talking about AI? And our thesis was that employment is the backbone of our society. If we can provide everyone a better career, better opportunity, we will make this world a much, much better place. And at the same time, every enterprise is dependent on having the right talent to grow and succeed over time. See, times could be good, times could be bad, but if you have the right talent, you can make through it. If not, you will flounder. So that was our key thesis. And second thing we realized is with the movement to cloud, there's a lot more data that is available now. So the amount of data that is available about people is more than ever. So we said that, can we learn from the data of pretty much every individual in the world, every professional out there? Look at their career trajectory, where they have gone, and use that to better understand what is people's potential. Not what they have done, but what they can do. Because take generative AI. It's a new tool, new technology that has come into the market, right? If you start looking for people who know generative AI, that set is very, very small. But if you start looking for people who can deliver on generative AI, that set is much, much larger. So what we are doing now with AI, that is what we have been doing over the last 6 years, is using data to learn everyone's potential, their capabilities, what is their learnability of their skills, and then sell it to large enterprises. So today we are being used by enterprises across 110 countries, across 25 plus languages, across 20 verticals, where enterprises are using us to hire the right talent, to grow, nurture the talent, upskill the talent, make sure their workforce is always future ready as these new trends come in, and while ensuring that they have good diversity.
Okay, I'll talk to you about your plans as far as the future is concerned in a second. But, Arvind, let's talk about your journey as far as Glean is concerned. 2021 is when you really started. And at this point in time, you're hoping to do what as far as this is concerned?
Yeah, well, so Glean is an AI-powered search engine for workplaces. It connects with all of your company's information that lives in many different enterprise applications, and then give users, your employees, one place where they can go and ask any questions, and it will bring the right information that they need to do their job. So that's what Glean does. So you can also think of it as, it's a Google or ChatGPT, but for your business, for your people. So we started in 2019, like me and like as Deep mentioned before, my co-founders and I spent a lot of time at Google before building in Google search, and we felt that in the business world, it's really frustrating and difficult for people to actually find the information that they need to do their job. People spend more than a third of their time just looking for information, and we felt that this problem had to be solved. So that's why we started Glean.
So you're hoping to solve the problem and improve efficiency for people in the workplace. We just heard from Ashutosh on their client roster. Who are the takers for yours?
Yeah, so Glean works with some of the world's best large enterprises. We have more than 100 customers, again spread across quite a few in the United States and then a few in different parts of the world. All the companies that use Glean, they bring the product to all of their employees, and it's a general purpose tool. It's actually, as you said, it's like ChatGPT. You come there, whatever questions you have, you're trying to figure out how to write code, how to do your, figure out how to resolve this, a complaint that a customer has actually filed, a case for, whatever your problems are. Generally, your work involves looking for knowledge inside the company, and that's what we do, and help people do their jobs faster.
since I have 3 Googlers or former Googlers here with me on the show, Deep, let me ask you, each one of you has said that it was really, AI has been around for 2 decades, as Ashutosh has very clearly explained to us, but it's been this generative AI sort of transformative moment which happened with ChatGPT barely 6 months ago that's taken the world by storm, that's captured imagination. And many questions are being asked now on Bard, as well as what this means as far as incumbents are concerned, and whether, at least as far as these large language models are concerned, the fact that it's the incumbents that are saying, let's regulate, is that self-serving, the call for regulation from the incumbents?
Definitely, there are 3 components to this, right? And we should recognize all of them. So the first is the level of research and the level of capital expenditure that is required for this is tremendously high. So the seminal paper about transformers came out of Google in 2017, which was attention is all you need. That probably was the culmination of billions of dollars of spend to be able to get to that understanding and that representation. And since then, OpenAI obviously has raised more capital, probably 10 times as much capital in the last 12 months alone, as is the entire spend of all the IITs and ISC combined in India. The budget for that is $1.2 billion, and OpenAI raised over $10 billion. So it's very capital intensive. The second is it requires very specialized skills. As Ashutosh was saying earlier, coming up with the ideas and building those models and algorithms is a very specialized skills. Applying it is a lot more general purpose skill. And the third thing is you also need to be able to deploy it at very large scale. So the incumbents have an advantage in all 3 of those areas. Now, the classic innovation that happens always is there's a step change in technology, and it opens up the doors and windows for newcomers to come in and take on the incumbents. And obviously, it will be in the incumbent's best interest to try and prevent that from happening.
So which is where we're probably going to see this debate on regulation play itself out. Who should regulate? What should be regulated? How much will be regulated? But speaking of regulation, Ashutosh, I want to understand from you, specifically since you're talking about skills and talent and using artificial intelligence within the HR space. In Europe, for instance, as and when the regulation does come into play, there is the requirement of a notification if you're using AI. What about the possibility of that here, and how would you deal with that?
So it's already coming in New York, although it has been getting shifted, but expectation is that in a month or 2, it will be live in New York. So those regulations are coming. Now, what the difference is, sometimes HR is considered to be a high-risk category. Now we can debate on the risk level. The key thing is not whether it should be regulated or not, or whether AI should be used or not. AI is getting used, and that ship has sailed. So AI is going to get used. It's a competitive advantage. So you can't rewind that stuff, right? Now saying that, we should stop the development in that, we should stop the research, I think doesn't work like that either, right? Or saying that we are going to regulate the actual algorithms makes no sense. But what you have to really think about, what is the application, how it is getting used, and focus on that stuff. So for example, in our space, right? How the data is getting generated, and what are the outcomes that enterprises are working towards, and making sure there is a full transparency around that stuff, like how it is impacting every protected class. And bringing that transparency, I think, is extremely valuable. So to me, having the right regulations will speed up the development over here. Today, there's a lot of confusion. Some people are saying, let's regulate. Some people are saying, let's not regulate. I would rather regulate, be transparent, be consistent, be clear, be concise, precise, and then so that actually the outcomes can be there, people can drive that, right?
But on this issue, and I want to get each one of you to comment on that, what should be regulated and who should design the regulation? Because one of the fears also is that because the incumbents are the ones who are sort of calling the shots, so to speak, they will also be the ones calling the shots when we talk about regulation. So who do you believe should regulate? And of course, the hope is that there will be harmonization across different regions. Otherwise, it will become even more complex.
No, great question. So when you talk about regulation, right, saying that you should use ChatGPT or you should not use ChatGPT, I think is meaningless. But in HR world, there's already a regulation. There's already EEOC and OFCCP. And EEC requires that there has to be equal employment opportunity. You can't discriminate against anyone based on their race, religion, caste, gender, ethnicity, age. You have to make sure that everyone is getting a fair chance. and not just for hiring purposes, for promotion purposes, for internal mobility, any of those things. So those regulations are already there, irrespective of whether you are using an AI system or a human being is going through that process. And to me, that is the right way to look at this thing. So that ultimately, it's all about what outcomes you're driving, and can you be transparent about those outcomes. Saying that I'm using through AI, so I should get regulated, but as a human being, I can do whatever I want, makes no sense, right?
Yeah, no, I
so I
agree
think
with you.
having that regulation around the actual outcome business that you're driving is how it should be, in my opinion.
Arvind, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so one thing I would add is the AI technologies are very powerful, and at this point, it's nobody knows what parts of your data, what information is actually being used, that's yours, and is being used to decide on outcomes, for example, in products that you use, or the employment that you have. And I think so it should be some regulations would actually help in the area of making sure that as an end user, you are in control of your own destiny.
Right.
You should be able to say that my search history, for example, things that I look for on the internet or inside my company, it should not be used to to start to actually build these AI models which are fully personalized and trained for me. So I think as long as that those kind of controls are provided, so that end users are in control of their privacy, and I think that's going to be helpful. And
that's a great segue for me to address the larger India role and relevance question in the AI era. Deepan, I want you to talk to me about this. The thesis is that, look, India is poised to be the data capital of the world, because where else is so much data being generated at this point in time? Look at the talent pool that we have, young talent base, the largest number of data scientists, and so on and so forth. But we still don't have a data protection or privacy bill. There are several pieces of legislation which are in various stages of progress. Hopefully one will now move to Parliament in the next session, is what we're given to understand. So how do you see India fitting in to the AI age?
So India does not have a choice but to fit in, not just fit in, but to lead in this. Historically, India has had one large export in the technology field, which was IT services, and that's become a $200 billion+ business annually. But we need to invent more things, right? And AI gives us that turn of the crank where everyone's at an equal space and at a level playing field, and we could do more there. One part is data, but right now where generative AI is models, algorithm, and math. And there's a lot of research that goes on there. And there, as we discussed earlier, in India is just not, our academic institutions are not set up for that research. So somehow we have to invest in that. And I don't think we can gloss over it, or we'll always be a few years behind. Because we'll be reading somebody else's papers and somebody else's thinking and trying to deploy it, as opposed to coming up with our own original thinking.
Right.
So that is the first thing that we need to do. The second thing we need to do is really, when it comes to regulation, policies, and self-policing, I think there are three components to it. Self-policing should and can happen very easily, because we know where the moral and ethical boundaries of most things are, right? Like, for example, no company on the internet, despite the fact that they are platforms and they don't generate content, ever lets pornography or child pornography stay on, because we all understand very explicitly and implicitly it's against all human moral and ethical code. There are many other such things that companies can do on their own. We don't need legislation or policies for that. Then when it comes to general policies, so that's where, for example, there's something called 230, which was a very seminal piece of legislation that came out, and Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon had proposed that, which talks about the general framework and said, hey, we want the industry to come up with a mechanism and a set of policies that you will all adhere to and come together and do it. We don't want to legislate because we don't know enough, and we also don't know where this would go.
Right.
And then final pieces are legislative. So they would be things like, financial services companies, for example, need to have certain, amount of reserve ratios on the balance sheet.
Right.
Otherwise, there could be issues like we saw in the regional banks recently in the US. So we have to, India can learn from this and say, what are the kinds of things that should have legislation? What are the kinds of things that we should bring everyone in the industry together and do some self-regulation around policy frameworks? And what are the things that you implicitly know you should do, and so just don't do the bad things, right? So that's, I think, the second part of it. The third part is understanding, not all data is created equal. One of the places where I think India has a huge advantage and could do a lot and leapfrog the same way we did with UPI compared to the financial infrastructure in other parts of the world is in healthcare. So Indian hospital systems see so much data and so much volume and actually are pretty advanced in terms of how they capture everything. There has not been really a good LLM that's based on that data, because that's not data that OpenAI has access to, that's not data that Google has access to, any of the big hyperscalers. We could start using that data with the appropriate permissions from the patients and bring in the collective technological prowess of India and maybe create a much better healthcare system and a much better health diagnostic system and much better healthcare therapeutic system.
Well, consent is always a gray area, and I hope that is something that we look at appropriately as we talk about the possibility of healthcare LLM that you just spoke of. But Deep, you've got a healthcare specific fund, and it's a fairly large one for GC. In light of the bets that you're willing to make, what new spaces in India would you want to consider?
So that's one. So in the US, we just helped co-create a company in the healthcare LLM space. And I believe that can be a big space in India. The second part that I believe, now that the geopolitical alliances are shifting, and after COVID, we all understood that single points of failures and depending on one player in any given geography is a bad thing for everyone. Supply chain resilience has become very important. And there's a re-globalization that's happening. I think India can play a very important part. And one of our 5 pillars of our strategy is global resilience. And what does that mean for different countries around the world? And that's become a very important theme for us as we look at India.
Okay. Ashutosh, India and the relevance of India as a market for you and the company?
First of all, we do have a large presence in India, and especially with access to talent over there, that is a big focus area to build our company, and most of the research and development is now happening in India. So that's a big focus for us. As a market, India is the future of talent. Most of the world's talent is sitting in India. But we talk a lot about how generative AI is changing with a variety of things. But one of the other biggest things that it is changing is how we do our work. So the implication of that is the people who are suited for a certain job today may not be suited for the same job tomorrow.
Right.
And a different set may be suited. So you have a workforce of hundreds of millions of people in India. How do you ensure that as new technologies are coming in, you are ensuring that those people are deployed in the right roles so that they can deliver to their fullest extent? And that is the key thesis and mantra of Eightfold. So as we look into that, India is a big focus for us.
But the risk of displacement, with the advent of new technologies, how significant a risk do you believe that poses for a market like India today?
I think that concern is very real. But as far as the way we look at it, the concern is not that the number of jobs will shrink, but certain jobs are going to disappear. And a large number of jobs are going to fundamentally change. As Deep said, right? There are basic fundamental problems in our society that are not yet solved. Cancer is still a big problem, right? In India, clean air, clean water is a big problem. Like ESG-related issues, big problem, right? So when we look at these problems, we just don't have enough people who are focused on these problems. And I think with LLMs, with ChatGPT, with the new advances in AI, we have the opportunity to redeploy our workforce to solve these big, big problems in our society. And that is where I think Eightfold can play a very big role.
Arvind, let's talk specifically about the company now. And, you've got barely a few years under the belt, so to speak, and a long trajectory looking ahead. You've been able to raise significant amounts of capital at this point in time, but it is a difficult environment, as we've just finished talking about. So how are you gearing up for the times that we live in, where technology is changing very fast, where there is, all kinds of uncertainties and volatility? How are you gearing up for this?
Well, as part of building a company is identifying, large problems that need to be solved. And so that's our core focus first. Like what are we trying to solve at Glean is we know that knowledge workers, people, when they work, it's actually, it's inefficient to work. People find it very, very hard to find information that they need to do their job. And it's a pervasive problem. So we know that we have a large problem that we're working on, that we have to solve. Now, it's actually interesting, as generative AI technologies have come into play, it's created an environment where how you write software or how you build systems is changing at such a fast pace that we've never seen before. Like we've been part, we've seen big revolutions, seminal sort of technology introductions that have happened in the past, like the internet, the mobile, the iPhone, but it never felt like for developers, it never felt like like what they're feeling today.
So this is nothing like you've seen before, is it?
It's nothing like what we've seen before. Today, developers are worried that hey, whatever I build right now, is it still the right thing to do 1 month later? So it's actually creating stress for people. But I think as a company, you have to just focus on the core problem that you have to solve. There's going to be a lot of distractions. There's going to be a lot of competition, but there is enough room for everybody to stay as long as you build good products. So that's the strategy that we follow.
And I want to bring up that issue about the stress that you spoke of and how you feel that, things are changing so quickly and so fast. So how does one create moats in an environment like this where, you've got probably the next guy who's using generative AI or some other emerging technology? I mean, the ability to create moats around each company is probably getting harder and harder, right, Deep?
It can. I have this framework, Shereen, having been at very successful companies like Google and LinkedIn, and then being in the investment world for the last 8 years, that there are 3 types of companies that get generated. 90% of the companies are faster horse companies, right? They take a given problem that is very well known and just make it a lot better. 9% of the companies are car companies, right? They see a problem which is like a transportation or a horse problem, and they build the car. 1% of companies are the spaceship companies, okay? They're like, that's also a mode of transportation, but it will open up such new vistas and such new frontiers for us that we've never seen, and it will just open up completely different worlds to us. When a step change in technology happens, that 1% can become 10%. More and more companies could be those, let's open up the new frontier companies. That creates short-term dissonance, but long-term prosperity. And it is incumbent of all of us, those of us who invest in these companies and help, nurture them and mentor them, and the founders who are building these companies, to say, how do we get over the short-term dissonance and discomfort that we all have? Because, new frontiers are new frontiers.
So do you have 2 spaceship companies sitting next to you?
100%.
Yeah?
100%. In fact, here's another little known fact. I was one of the first checks in both the companies long before General Catalyst invested in them.
Okay,
That much I believe in both the founders and their vision.
Are you feeling the pressure now? Escape velocity is the ask of you.
Having Deep as an investor has been exciting. I mean, as Deep said, right, he wrote the first check, then when he was at SoftBank, he wrote the second check, and now he's at GC. So it's been a privilege to work with Deep.
No, I would imagine. But Deep, speaking of writing checks and funds, what, $12 billion, 11 funds, a 12th on the anvil?
That is correct.
By when do we expect that announcement to be made? And $5 billion is
we can't really talk
a rumored number.
We can't talk about new funds being created because it would be against SEC rules.
Okay, all right. But something's coming soon.
We hope so.
Okay, so soon enough. So, speaking of funds, and you've both, of course, raised significant capital at this point in time, but what we are seeing is now fiscal discipline, or much more fiscal discipline than the last few years. How is that? Is that slowing down the pace of innovation or expansion at this point in time? You've also had to take tough decisions within your individual companies, given the environment.
Yes, the market has shifted. 2 years back, it was like growth at all costs. Now everyone is talking about efficient growth. And fortunately, we raised the money back in 2021, so good timing. What it does is that the way we look at it is that now we don't have to ever raise money by necessity. So that puts us in a great place. And be a bit more thoughtful about where you're spending money and how you're spending money. So not everything needs to be done on day one. We can spread it out until the market shifts. So yes, we are being a lot more thoughtful and prudent about how we are spending the money.
Okay, so since you clearly have a runway at this point in time, what are the bets that you see yourself making over the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you see the company over the next 3 to 5 years?
So one is, I think as Arvind mentioned, right? Focus on a fundamental problem that we believe is going to be there for the long term. And in our case, that problem is employment. Employment is going to be there. Generative AI, no generative AI, markets may shift, but when you have people, you have to feed them. And for that, work has to be there, right? So that is a fundamental problem that we are working on. And as part of that, what we realized is there is more than $1 trillion that gets spent on talent as a problem. Whether you're trying to hire people, you're trying to retain them, you're trying to nurture them, grow them, and you skill them, upskill them, right? So that's a very, very big market. So we are very focused on that. And the idea is that use this time. Frankly, as an entrepreneur, this is a great time because it reduces the competition. We are in a fortunate place where we have good customer base, good money, good innovation going on. So use that to build the entire talent platform. So it's no longer about a point solution. It's no longer about a single wedge, but it's now we are at a stage where we are like, let's build the entire platform so that every talent solution can be built on top of it.
Arvind, what's the 5-year plan?
Yeah, so see, one thing I wanted to talk about is generative AI is sort of making it feel like everything is easy. Like you can do amazing things, and all you have to do is just send a request to OpenAI and get all the answers come back to you. But for us, like our vision is very simple. We want to give every single person who works in the world a personal assistant, an assistant who knows everything about their company. They've been part of every discussion, they've read every single document that has been written in this company, and they have all that knowledge, and they're available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and ready to answer any questions that you have. And we feel like that's going to be the future of work. All of us are going to have that AI-powered personal assistant. It won't be limited to just the executives of a company. So that's the vision that we're working towards, and it's a hard problem to solve. Everybody has seen the power of ChatGPT and like how smart it is, but I think making it work in your company environment is actually quite difficult because the company environments are very, very different from the internet. Your